Hello, everyone. This is Amrita Miraj Dubey, one of the Senior Corporate Communications Officers of the Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts. And today we are wrapping up our virtual series for Indian Arrival Day with a very exciting and vibrant discussion on the evolution of Ramleela. Joining me today is Pandita Indrani Rampersad, and I know that she's very excited to be here with us. And Pandita is an independent researcher, and she also calls herself an intellectual Kshatriya, which means warrior. And Pandita also was a former research fellow with the University of Trinidad and Tobago in the area of Ramleela studies. So Pandita, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the Ministry's virtual series for Indian Arrival Day.
Well, namaste to Trinidad and Tobago and to you too. It is a pleasure being with you and the Ministry of Community Development.
Yes, yes. And today we are going to talk about the evolution of Ramleela, of course, being one of the biggest, if not the biggest, open-air theatre experience in Trinidad and Tobago. And it is a staple in our Diwali festivities. We can't celebrate Diwali. Diwali is sort of incomplete without observing or hosting Ramleela in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, Ramleela, it walks us through or gives us a story, the account of Sri Ram from the point of his birth. It takes us throughout his life and the many challenges that he encounters. We see his marriage with Sita and, of course, his eventual exile into the forest of 14 years. And, of course, towards the end, we see where he encounters the mighty evil King Ravan, and of course, he defeats Ravan in the process. But Ramleela, it is an epic story. It is a very important part of our pastime. There's so many elements, from the costuming to the decor to the actual narration and directing. So, Pandita, I will hand over to you to share with us an overview of Ramleela in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, Amrita, for that very erudite presentation. Indeed, Ramleela is the largest open-air presentation, we think, in the Western world. Annual, that is, annual.
Yes.
It started around 1880 in Trinidad. Around 1880, we are looking at, when we look at the settlement of the Indians after the end of indentureship and when they started forming communities.
Right.
And then they would have started, once they got into little settlements, to start to recoup their cultural activities. And something we must always remember, the Hindu, very much like the traditional African persons like Orishas and so on, are people who are what we would call religious man. Religious man. Eliade had coined that term. Religious man, meaning that these are people who see the whole world in terms of religion. I use that word religion very, very reservedly because it doesn't capture dharma in our context. The religious person sees everything through the lens of the spiritual world. So their worldview and everything they did had to have some element of spirituality in it. And once you
Right.
understand that, you begin to see why, for example, Orishas and Hindus really share so much in common, but everything is about a spiritual intervention. Now, the Ramleela from 1880 to now has undergone a lot of change, and I think more so in recent times. And,
Right.
and we must,
Right.
we must thank UTT and Raviji, who had at that time was with UTT and kind of encouraged that Ramleela be studied as one of the hidden cultures. It's something that was happening, and we didn't know much about it. So we must be thankful to them for giving that fillip to the performance. So this term Leela is about the mystery of the Lord appearing in his own creation.
Right. Right. Of course, where we get the name Ramleela from. So it's depicting the life, and it's perhaps a reenactment of the life of Sri Ram.
Right, because there are several manifestations of Vishnu. And the two major ones in our recent times is Ram Leela and Krishna Leela.
Yes.
Yeah, the Krishna Leela was there, very popular in Trinidad before Ram Leela. Ram Leela
Mhm.
became popular. Um, in my research, it seems to be after the
Okay.
Krishna Leela. Mhm.
Right.
So there are two major styles of enacting this Leela. So what the philosophy is, if you, the individual, want to identify with the Lord, you would enact that and be like that. So the performers, there are five major swarupas, we call them, divinities. Ram, Bharat, Lakshman, Shatrughan, Sita, of course, five divinities. And you have to live and become them in your total being. It was a transformation of yourself.
Right. That's
And,
a personal Leela.
yes.
Something. Yes. Okay.
And as you say, personal, there's the word called darshan.
Yeah.
Darshan means you get a glimpse of the Lord. However, you see that expression of that highest one reality. And the darshan, a lot of people in earlier days, once they're devotional and approach this with a particular mindset, they would get a glimpse. And how do you know they have gotten that glimpse? They change. There's a transformation in the person. So a lot of people would get that. So the Krishna, there are two styles of doing this Leela, because the devotees love to do it. They love
Right.
Ram. They are Ram devotees. They are Krishna devotees. So they want to enact the same Leelas that he did while he was on earth. So the Leela style, there are two major styles. Something we call the Leela style, meaning it is amateur. This is what our ancestors brought from the villages of North India. It was amateur, it was folk, it was devotional, realistic, open air, in the open air. It was mimetic. They didn't speak, they mimed, because
Right.
Vishnu was supposed to be the Lord of mime in the beginning, and so they mime. And in found space, they didn't have any special um, space to do it. Wherever they found in the sugarcane estates, they had a clearing, they would find that space, and they would perform there. And the narration was like a Vyas or Pandit in a katha.
Right.
It's called katha style.
Yes.
Look at it. What does the Pandit do in the katha, in the yajna? He sits there, he reads, and he explains. And it's the same thing being done here in the Leela style. The Pandit is there reciting the verses, and the devotees are enacting it.
Right.
Simple. The whole village got involved. No religion barrier, no race barrier. Everybody in the village had a space there. And the second one was the dramatic theatrical style, where you had to learn how to act. You had stylized movements. You were on a stage, you practice, you were professional, and that kind. Those are traveling troops. People would have a troupe and they travel around the country performing. So two major styles. I want to remind Trinidad and Tobago also in 2005, UNESCO declared Ramleela a new masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. This is not a
Yes,
heritage
yes,
only of Trinidad and Tobago, of India, of the Indian diaspora. It's a heritage of humanity.
yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's and because it is also recommends safeguarding measures, that every country should institute safeguarding measures to protect such performances because they give identity to a community. You don't want to lose that.
Right, right. Now you talked about briefly the early manifestations of Ramleela. Can you tell us a little bit more in terms of what the costuming would have looked like, what the actual setup, the actual open air theater experience would have been like as Ramleela was evolving through the years?
Well, in the beginning, their clothing was very simple. The Hanuman you would see with a little short, little red pants, the little and monkeys and so on. They had very simple clothing, and the makeup was also very the items that they had around them in Trinidad. That was the items that they used,
Right.
and you would have seen some of the pictures with the little dots around the forehead and the cheeks. We still use it,
Yes, yes.
the folk kind of makeup. So nowadays you would find the movement between Trinidad and India is a little more, more flow. And people are bringing back costumes from India, for example. Um, and as you move from a rural to a little more urban, your style, your tastes also change. So you will find the taste of the village, rural village. I mean, most of Trinidad is no longer really hardcore rural. A
Right.
lot of we have a very developed country, um, and so you find that people tastes and so on change, and the organizers are trying to make the the costuming and the makeup and so on a little more attractive, a little
Right.
more
Right.
attractive. And as I say that too, I want to talk about the carnival influence that has
Okay,
entered.
that's
Yeah,
interesting. Yes.
and you've noted that at the Balram Dilla, which was wonderful, when there's a picture of Jatayu and the wings of Jatayu. Actually, I made the trek down to San Fernando with Ravji and the others to meet the carnival mask maker who was actually doing that. And do you
Right.
know, Amrita, that guy actually fasted before making that
Wow.
costume.
Right. Right.
Yeah, he
The
observed the
principles
nuns.
of Ramleela has sort of infiltrated other cultural spheres.
Yes, and he respect. And that was a phenomenal costume. That was made around 2007. We are now in 2020, and they are still using that costume. They took it
Yes,
to
I
India.
remember that one. Yes, very
Yes,
spectacular indeed. Yes. Yes.
yes, and that's because you don't get, we don't. It's not a thing about wasting money. You shouldn't be wasting money every year to make new costumes when the same things can be reused. But of course, people want to see new things too, and so you could use monies in that new way,
Yeah.
creative to make creative stuff. So that change I have seen, the change of dialogue. People want to hear themselves now, but that wasn't so before, because you were miming. And if you understood, you were miming just like the Lord was miming. But we have lost a lot of the theoretical understanding behind the performance. And
And
so we are
what when
going
you
to a
say
different
lost a lot of the theoretical components, you want to go into that because one of the questions I wanted to ask is, what are some of the elements of Ramleela that we've lost over the years?
well, certainly the language.
Hmm.
Certainly the language. And that's the major one. And it's a child's right to be able to have their ancestral language. And we really, having lost that language, even though we didn't speak that language, but we knew that language. The language of the Ramcharit Manas was Awadhi,
Mm-hmm.
Awadhi, and they could all speak that. And it was a variant of Hindi. And um, when you sing something that is now a foreign language and you don't understand it, we just end up now with a rhythm, tal, and you don't know the meaning. So one of the big problems we are having is trying to understand ourselves in the colonial language of English. So we ended up having losing what was ours and having to take English. Why not have both? We need
Right.
both, because you can't translate away. We are being forced to translate away our identity. And in the process, we are losing our worldview. We can't understand the worldview because the language in which it is couched is lost.
Yes.
Now, can you imagine poetry? Can you imagine just saying I love you in a straight lines, I love you, as again saying it in a poetic form, I
Yes,
love you?
it evokes a different feeling. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So poetry, the Ramcharitmanas, is an epic poem.
Yeah.
You can't translate a poem into prose and say it in a dialogue. So that's a major thing that we are losing, a major thing. And we go back to the sattvic element, and the vachik element, um, in Ramleela, the aesthetics of Ramleela. Uh, it was meant to be heard. The devotee wanted to hear. When Tulsidas wrote the Ramcharitmanas, and when he started it is believed that he started the Ramleela in Asighat in Banaras, where I lived for many years, and where Gita Ji was living right on the Ghats as well.
Yeah.
Um, he started it there, and the objective was so that people would hear and grow in their devotion towards Ram. You had to hear the poetic language, and that's a big loss.
Right, right. Now, I want to ask you something about the music because I know that today we have, of course, as you said, pundits narrating, or in the case of Bal Ramdula, for example, you have children narrating and directing. And of course, they sing from the scripture itself. But I want to talk more about the singing elements. I mean, back then you may not have had the tacit music, you may not have had the full setup, musical accompaniment that you have now. So, what was singing like?
Yes, the musical element is the Vachik element, and the sounds in drama, in Indian drama, all of that counts. How you tell the story. And when I say story here, I don't mean a fiction. When you tell people, in literature, when you speak of the story here, you're talking about a narrative. So this sacred narrative of Ram that's being told, when you hear the storyteller telling it, it's a story, it's a skill.
Yes.
It's a skill, rise and fall of the voice, and the poetic language and the sounds that you use, the jhal, the tassa, the harmonium, bhajans, all these were part of the whole contingent of the Ramleela to create. That is the aesthetics, the enjoyment of the Ramleela. Um, the tassa sounds, for example, different. There were different beats, like when it's fighting in a war, there was a different beat, and it's usually used in that context. I don't see it used in India, but we in Trinidad have used it, and I know in Suriname they don't use it. Well, Guyana, Ramleela died in Guyana and was revived, like around 2007. Raviji had gone there. I had gone also with him to train a
Right.
couple of people in reviving Ramleela there. So the community groups coming in, it's a nice element. Everybody in the community had something. And when you look at the Mela environment, it used to be a long time, like in Dow Village, they would have a big market at that time, big mela selling things, people eating and drinking and walking around.
Yeah.
You see that in First Felicity Ramleela, and a couple of them. You see it many places. So it was a whole community event. Did that
Yes.
answer your question?
Yes, yes, definitely.
And if I can go to the aharia element,
Uh-huh.
which talks about the costuming, the makeup, the hairstyle, the setting, open air setting is the original setting of the Ramleela, open air, because that is an element of the creator. The environment, the open air was also Vishnu was transcendent. He believed that to be in that space as well. So that's why the enjoyment of Ramleela in the open air is different to seeing it on a stage.
It's a different
Two different
experience.
things.
Yeah.
So the open air setting is really the gives you a different aesthetic. It's a different experience of both the performer and the audience. Remember, the audience comes, they're all informal. They walk around, they they bond. So that's a different experience. The
Right.
costuming, the angic, the movements. In the open air, you have large movements, very big, as against a stage. Artwork elements, some of the pictures show you Shiva and Parvati. Why is Shiva and
Yes.
Parvati there? As for the narrative, Shiva and Parvati, Shiva is telling the story to
Yes.
Parvati.
He's telling the
And so
story.
you
So
have
that's
Shiva and Parvati walking around
yeah.
the space, telling the story. That symbolism is there.
Yeah.
And another thing with the Ramleela space, it's sacred space. When it begins, they begin with rituals that consecrate the space. Remember, I said the Hindu is a religious person who sees everything in terms of religion. So that space has to be consecrated at the beginning and at the end. It is, um, well, deconstructed, as it were. But at the beginning, all the deities of the Vaishnava world are invited through puja to reside in that Ramleela space. As you see the Jhandi also, the Jhandi, is very unique to the Caribbean.
Yeah.
I've seen some of it in South Africa also, some of it in Fiji, that's a little different. Mauritius also a little different. But we have it very colorful in the Caribbean. And you will see very tall Jhandis, which is
Right.
a sign of consecration of that space. The burning of Ravan at the end.
Yes. Mighty
People say
effigy.
burning. It's not violence. This is the cremation of Ravan. The burning symbolizes cremation process. It's not like if we are violently burning the man. There are
Hmm.
parts in India where two places I visited where Ravan is not burnt at the end. And in fact, in one place, people take little pieces of the effigy and they make tabij
Okay.
for
Okay.
protection.
Right.
Ravan is not. Ravan was a great bhakta of Shiva, and he is revered and honored in many places. But the burning of Ravan at the end is really the cremation at the end. You'll see some pictures too with the aerial step. The 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 male swarupas have a kind of aerial step, high step when they are walking. They lift one leg up to the knee of the other and then they move
Yes.
very gently forward.
Yes.
Aerial step. That suggests that they are neither of the earth nor the sky.
Right.
So hence you get that aerial step.
Very beautiful. Very
And the
beautiful.
women do short steps in their
Right.
movements, and that's a part of the dramatic tradition of India. Comic.
Right.
That's a comic element. Remember, this was also being told in dramatic style. India has a rich tradition of performance. In fact, the world's first text, the Natya Shastra, that brought together performance information, how to do it, is in India, the Natya Shastra. So they have a long tradition of how to perform. and the comic was an element. They have like the 9 rasas, the 9 major forms of emotions, that a good performance must include all of these. So you must have some element. There's a dominant one. For example, in our Ramcharitmanas, in the Ramleela, which goes according to the Ramcharitmanas, the dominant rasa is bhakti. It is devotional.
Right.
But in the original, in the first epic that was written by Valmiki, the Ramayana of Valmiki was written in Sanskrit, and the rasa there is Bir rasa, a hero, where Ram is that hero, the great king. And I'll give you some beautiful bows as well. The bow is the big thing, when you see that Ram has to lift this bow that nobody else could lift to get the hand of Sita at the Swayamvar. So beautifully told in the Ramcharitmanas. And then some of the props that we make, like how you make the boat, all with the kind of knowledge, traditional knowledge that came from India. And some places have been very creative. Cedar Hill Ramleela, for example, has a bridge, the Ram Setu, going to Lanka, and the
Right.
bridge is built high up in the air, so you can cross over the bridge, and they have
Right.
Ram written on the bridge. Very beautiful. And in
Right.
Avocat, they actually have something high, steps to go up. And it's like the divinities are sitting up there in the heavens, as it were. In Avocat, very, very creative. So our people have come up with very creative ways of telling the story. And in First Felicity, you will see very innovative costuming, and especially on the Rawan side, the masks and so on, very outstanding. And the Hanuman is a very devotional character. The person who performs as Hanuman undergoes a lot of sadhana and so on before performing that role. And you remember long ago, the performers used to stay in the home of the Vyas for 10 days. You had to live there
Oh, okay.
in the mandir, and you learned there in the mandir how to move, how to do things. So it
Right.
was a total immersion.
Right.
Orange Valley Ramleela also has some beautiful masks that they make. And actually, they are the only group in the country that does um, uh, they walk along the street performing the Ramleela from one place along the village to another place, mobile, as it were. It's the only one of its kind in the country. The Orange
Right.
Valley Ramleela, the Vishnu Mandir there.
Right. Right. Okay, so Pandita, thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. I'm sure that our audiences will truly appreciate the volume of knowledge that they would have gained over this past half hour. So thank you very much for sharing this with us, and I'm sure everyone has learned something new about Ramleela in Trinidad and Tobago and how our ancestors would have nurtured this tradition.
Thank you, and namaste.